Imagine if all of Donald Trump's wildest tariff plans actually became reality tomorrow. The world wakes up to a new trade war. Imports taxed, exports blocked. Every country scrambles to react. Who wins? Who loses? Let's break it down, one country at a time. First up, China. Trump's idea? Up to 100% tariffs on Chinese goods. That means almost everything from phones to furniture could double in price overnight. US factories might see a short-term boost, but American consumers, they pay the bill. China loses billions in exports and maybe 0.5% of GDP gone. Beijing strikes back. Tariffs on soybeans, cars, and tech. They limit rare earth exports crucial for US chips and batteries. Result? Higher prices, slower trade, and more tension. Both sides bleed. Next, Mexico. A 25% tariff on Mexican goods would shake both economies. Why? Because Mexico builds parts for almost every US car, electronics, and appliance, exporting $191 billion in 2024 alone. Those parts suddenly cost more. Factories slow down, job losses on both sides of the border. Mexico hits back with its own tariffs on some agricultural products, steel and aluminum. It's not just a neighbor fight, it's a supply chain earthquake. But goods that comply with the USMCA are exempt from these tariffs. That limits how broadly the US tariffs apply and gives Mexico some breathing room, thanks to trade rules. Canada isn't safe either. The US slaps a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, steel, aluminum, even some cars. Canada fires back with its own 25% tariffs on American metals and machinery. Factories on both sides feel the strain. But like Mexico under USMCA, many goods are exempt, softening the blow but not the message. Talks continue, yet the trust is shaken. Canada's leaders warn of supply shocks, and Buy Canadian campaigns spread fast. Automakers hedge bets, investors wait. For two countries that share the world's longest open border, the tariff wall just got a little higher. No winners here, only smaller losses. Now the European Union. Trump's plan? A 15% universal tariff for balanced trade. Germany, France, Italy, all export heavy. Cars, wine, fashion, machinery, all suddenly more expensive in the US. The EU answers with tariffs on American tech, whiskey, and farming goods. Trade volume drops. European growth slows by approximately 0.3%, not a collapse, but a sting. The old allies turn into trade rivals. India faces 50% tariffs on steel, textiles, and medicines. Three pillars of its export economy. That's not a small shock, but India adapts fast. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Make in India campaign, the country turns inward, boosting domestic production and pushing for self-reliance. At the same time, it pivots trade outward toward Africa, the Middle East, and ASEAN. New deals with the UAE, Indonesia, and Kenya keep factories running and exports alive. Still, millions of jobs tied to US trade take a hit. The tariffs hurt, but they also fuel India's long game, becoming the world's next manufacturing powerhouse. The US and Japan signed what's being called a historic trade deal, a 15% tariff on Japanese imports, replacing Trump's earlier threat of 25%. In exchange, Japan pledged to invest $550 billion into US industries and boost imports of American farm products. Sounds huge, right? But here's the twist. Some say it's more performance than policy. Critics call it a show deal, meant to prove that Trump can strike big international wins. There's no fully ratified legal treaty, only a framework. So what happens if this deal ever becomes fully real? The tariff deal could shave 0.3 to 0.5% off Japan's GDP in the short term and cost tens of thousands of export-linked jobs. It's survival through adaptation. Politically, Trump wins, but strategically, Japan might. If it turns the pressure into fuel for a faster shift toward a self-reliant, tech-driven economy. South Korea and the US are locked in one of the most tense trade standoffs of 2025. It all started with Trump's sweeping tariff threats. 25% on autos, electronics, steel, including imports from Korea. In July, a deal was announced. The tariff would be trimmed to 15% in return for South Korea pledging $350 billion in U.S. investments. But the deal remains fragile as Korea asked for guarantees in stage projects. Tensions rose further when U.S. authorities raided a Hyundai/LG EV battery plant in Georgia in September, detaining hundreds of Korean engineers, the very people sent to set up the factory and train American workers. Trump scores a political headline, forcing Korea's hand. But in reality, U.S. consumers pay more and bilateral trade suffers. South Korea loses export margin, but gains incentive to deepen tech self-reliance, rewire supply chains toward ASEAN, India, or EU markets. The real power will go to countries and companies that can move fast, innovate, and adapt. What about Americans? What will the consequences be? American companies would be hit first. Car makers like Ford and Tesla, parts costs explode. Tech firms like Apple and Nvidia, supply chains freeze, margins shrink. Retail giants, Walmart to Target, face higher prices and thinner margins. Then comes the blow to consumers. Phones, clothes, appliances, groceries, everything costs more. Inflation rises. As Steve Forbes recently warned, higher tariffs act like hidden taxes. People will have to work more just to buy what they want. Meanwhile, U.S. exporters, farmers, chip makers, aerospace manufacturers face retaliation. Foreign buyers turn to cheaper alternatives. Politically, it might look like strength, but economically, it's a tax on America itself. We all end up paying for pride, for politics, for power. So who wins in this world of tariffs? No one fully. The U.S. gains leverage, but inflation bites. China loses exports, but grows self-reliant. Europe, Asia, and North America all reshuffle alliances. Trade wars rarely end cleanly. They just redraw the map of power and pain. This is the world at risk, and it might arrive faster than you think. Then what really happens when the global system shakes? When supply chains snap, who steps in to rebuild? That's coming up in the next video. Stick around. Because in this new economy, your capability is the real currency. Let's explore how trade chaos creates tomorrow's innovators. What do you think will happen? Leave a comment. And if you would like to dig into what Trump-era economics really mean, not just for America, but for the global system that has held since World War II, highly recommend this book.